This is TWiT.
Hi, Denise Howell. Thanks for joining us, host of This Week in Law. My first question is, why doesn't the FCC simply declare broadband providers common carriers and then say, and by the way, these are the rules?
Well, the common answer to that question is that it would be really, really politically difficult on the FCC if they did that.
Okay.
That they would face a lot of opposition on that front. There is a perception.
What are the implications? What happens if they're a common carrier? Why is that tough?
Well, some people think that there's a lot more onerous regulation that will follow, given that definition.
So this is the camel's nose under the tent.
Right. Yeah. And some people think, no, that the FCC can do plenty under the other designation, and it really doesn't make much difference. So, people say that it's a political decision, that designation. Personally, I have a hard time thinking information service, telecommunication service. How do you call the internet or broadband services is what we're talking about here? Either one. I just have a really hard time getting my head around that and putting it into either one of those boxes. It seems like
if they're a common carrier, that means that, like the phone company, they're not responsible for the data that goes over the line. That you can't go sue the phone company because somebody plotted on a telephone call to do something. It's not their fault. They're a common carrier. It seems to me the internet should be a common carrier. I don't see why AT&T would even want responsibility for the bits that go over their internet.
Don't. I mean, very much Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act is a huge umbrella.
Example. Yeah.
Right. Is a huge umbrella for all kinds of unlawful activity that ISPs could otherwise be held responsible for.
So who doesn't want them to be called common carriers?
I believe it's the telco industry in general.
They themselves don't want to be classified that way.
No, they don't.
Well, because they didn't have to be net
because
neutral.
they own media companies.
Right.
Because because if they were classified as common carriers, they couldn't do that deal that we've been hearing about, where they will ask certain services to pay for the bandwidth. That was actually a great conversation on This Week in Law, which I listened earlier, and there were excellent points on both sides of the debate. But it seems very clear that the only reason that these telcos would not want to be classified as common carriers is that they want to treat different types of data differently.
They want
extract more money.
They don't want net neutrality. They want to do like AT&T is doing with its sponsored data plan. They want to say to Netflix, if you was to give us some extra money, we could tell our customers that you don't cost anything, and they'd use you more, and say to YouTube or TWiT, by the way, you didn't give us any money, so you're going to cost more for the customers. That's exactly what we're afraid of happening.
Right. But I got to say, I've always been a huge advocate of net neutrality, and I've always been sort of viscerally drawn to the concept that we need regulation to make sure that those deals don't happen. But having, had the discussion that we had on TWiL this week, and having gone through a bit of the DC Circuit's decision and reasoning on this, there is something to be said for letting the market make a bit of the decisions on this.
Is that what Judge Titel was proposing?
Yes, that's definitely. There was a huge emphasis on, what you can do, FCC, under your mandate and authority. So less a question of, laissez-faire, what is the market going to do as far as the court is concerned? But that's the impact, right? That we now have some opportunity to let this play out. And yes, I am concerned that networks like ours, ours is pretty well established, even more fringe kinds of startups will be impacted by these sort of sponsored data deals. But the only way that winds up having a really detrimental impact is if people jump on board and say, oh yeah, all I need is who's in the sponsored data plan, and I don't want access to the full internet. You know, it's really going to be consumer demand that drives this. And Leo, do you really think that people are going to turn their back on having full internet access? I mean, don't you think that people have been conditioned now that they want access to whatever they want on the web?
I think it influences people's decisions. People are economic entities. And I think that if you as a user know that you could watch videos on Netflix and it won't go against your data cap or cost you money, but that if you watch the same video on another service, it will, you're going to choose Netflix every time. Now, whether people will watch TWiT is not, and I've said this last week, I don't think it affects TWiT particularly, but it very well might affect new companies coming into the business who would have to make that calculation. Gosh, if I'm not willing to pay AT&T for sponsored access, am I going to be disadvantaged? And a new company might very well be.